The twin suns of Virka burned red in the evening sky, painting the broken land with the color of blood. The air trembled with heat, smoke, and the sound of distant thunder, not from storms, but from the march of 1,000 alien soldiers. On the high ridge stood Kalira, princess of the Velari, her silver armor cracked and stained. Her once proud army lay scattered across the battlefield below. What remained of her warriors, barely 100 from 10,000, now formed a circle around her. Their banners were torn, their weapons dull, and their eyes heavy with exhaustion. The enemy surrounded them, the Drakhul horde, creatures of scaled flesh and heavy armor, built for war and destruction. They moved like living tanks, their black metal suits shining under the red sun. Their warlord, Vorak the Devourer, stood at the center of their line, his plasma blade glowing green as he raised it high. Kalira's voice rang across the ridge. "Hold your ground. The Velari do not kneel." Her soldiers straightened, clutching their broken spears and cracked shields. They had no illusions of survival, but they had something else, pride. The kind of pride that came from centuries of honor and tradition. Kalira gripped her spear tighter. Its crystal core flickered weakly. The weapon's energy was dying like the world around her. Below, Vorak's laughter echoed, deep and cruel. "You fought well, little princess," he growled. "But this is where your story ends. Surrender your world, and I may let you live long enough to witness its fall." Kalira lifted her chin. "If I must fall, then I will fall standing." The Drakhul warlord sneered. "So be it." He raised his blade, and when the horde advanced, the ground shook as the Drakhul closed in. Their heavy steps thundered like drums of doom. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, cutting down Velari soldiers in flashes of light. The defenders roared back, spears and energy blades flashing, but they were too few. Every minute, more of them fell. Kalira fought like a storm. Her movements were fast, precise, and like a dance of fury and grief. Each strike found its mark, each parry saved a life. Her broken armor glowed faintly, reacting to her heartbeat. But for every Drakhul she cut down, 3 more took its place. The Velari line collapsed inward. The circle grew smaller. One soldier shouted, "We're surrounded!" Another cried, "There are too many." Kalira turned, eyes blazing. "Then make every strike count." She lunged forward, driving her spear into a Drakhul commander's chest. The weapon flared bright and then shattered. The crystal exploded in her hands, and she stumbled back as shards of energy scattered across the ground. The shockwave knocked her down. She looked at the broken shaft in her grip. Her last weapon gone. The Drakhul roared in triumph. Vorak stepped forward, towering over her. "You fought bravely, princess. But bravery without power is nothing." Kalira forced herself to her feet. Her body trembled, but her gaze didn't falter. "Power is not what makes us strong," she said softly. Vorak raised his blade. "Then show me your strength, without your weapon." He charged. Kalira braced herself. But before the blow could land, the sky above them screamed. At first, everyone thought it was thunder. Then the light came. A bright streak tearing through the clouds, trailing fire and smoke. It grew larger, faster, until it split the heavens like a falling star. The Drakhul looked up, confused. Kalira's eyes widened. Whatever it was coming straight toward them. The object, no, a drop pod, hit the ground behind the enemy lines like a meteor. The shockwave knocked soldiers off their feet. Dust and debris exploded into the air. For a moment, everything went silent. Only the crackle of burning metal filled the air. Then, from the crater, a figure rose. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in battered metal armor that didn't belong to any known species. His helmet visor glowed faint blue, cracked but still active. Across his chest was a symbol no Velari had ever seen, a small blue and white flag of Earth. The stranger moved slowly, shaking off dust. He looked around at the chaos, the alien soldiers, the smoke, the princess standing weaponless, and sighed like someone who had woken up late for work. "Guess I missed the welcome party," he muttered. A Drakhul soldier lunged at him, snarling. The stranger didn't even flinch. He sidestepped, grabbed the creature's arm and slammed it into the ground with bone-breaking force. Then he pulled a weapon from his hip, a sleek black pulse rifle, human-made, and fired. The shot hit another Drakhul straight in the head, leaving a hole the size of a fist. The Velari stared. No one moved. The human looked up at Kalira and said casually, "Mind if I enter the fight?" Kalira blinked, still trying to process what she was seeing. "Who are you?" she asked. He smirked beneath his cracked visor.
"Captain Eli Graves."
Earth Defense Forces. The name meant nothing to her, but the confidence in his tone did. The Dracul, recovering from the shock, growled and surrounded him. Vorak pointed his blade. "Kill that thing." Eli rolled his shoulders. "You can try." Then he moved. He was faster than anyone expected, ducking, weaving, firing with perfect precision. Each shot found a weak spot. Each movement was efficient, brutal, almost beautiful in its simplicity. The Dracul were larger, stronger, but Eli was unpredictable, a soldier who fought like a storm-given form. Kalira felt something strange. Hope. "Velari," she shouted. "Rally behind him." The survivors obeyed. They moved as Eli directed, forming tight lines while he provided covering fire. He shouted commands like a commander born for chaos. "Left flank. Push forward. Focus fire on the heavies. Use their own shields against them." He fought not just with strength but with strategy, something the Dracul didn't expect. Within minutes, the tide began to shift. Kalira grabbed a fallen spear and fought beside him. For the first time that day, her people advanced instead of retreating. Eli turned to her between shots. "You've got good fighters. They just need better odds," she nodded. "And you seem to make those," he grinned. That's the human way. They fought side by side, alien princess and human soldier, against an army that thought them already dead. The ridge became a storm of light, metal, and fury. When Eli ran out of ammunition, he didn't stop. He used the rifle as a club, smashing through Dracul armor. Kalira covered his flank, spinning her spear in a blur of silver and flame. Together they cut a path through the enemy ranks. Vorak roared in fury. "Enough." He charged forward, swinging his massive blade at Eli. Eli blocked the strike with his forearm plate. The armor shattered, but he didn't fall. He ducked under the next swing, grabbed a fallen plasma grenade, and shoved it into Vorak's armor joint. "Catch," he said, and kicked the warlord backward. The explosion lit up the ridge. The Dracul screamed and scattered. Their leader wounded, his armor cracked. Eli turned to Kalira, panting but smiling. "You still standing, princess?" She nodded, breathless. "You fight like a demon," he shrugged. "We just call it being human." As the last of the Dracul retreated down the ridge, silence fell once more. Smoke drifted through the air. The sun dipped lower, turning the world gold. Kalira looked around at her surviving soldiers, barely 50 now, but alive. She turned back to the strange warrior who had fallen from the sky. "Captain Graves," she said softly, "you came from the stars?" He looked up at the sky, his eyes tired. "Yeah, my ship didn't survive re-entry." "I didn't expect to either," she studied him. "Why fight for us? You don't even know who we are." Eli wiped soot from his visor and smiled faintly. "You were outnumbered, outgunned, but you were still standing." He looked at her. "That's enough reason for me." Kalira said nothing. For the first time in days, she smiled. High above them, the sky burned faintly, pieces of Eli's ship still falling like distant stars. The night was cold on Virka Ridge. The fires from the battle still burned in the distance, painting the dark sky orange. Smoke rose from the ruined field where hundreds of alien soldiers lay silent. The war drums of the Dracul had finally stopped. Only the wind remained. Princess Kalira sat near a small campfire, her armor scratched, her spear now reforged from a broken shaft and a piece of alien metal. Around her, what was left of the Velari army tried to rest. They were too tired to speak, too wounded to dream. But every few minutes, their eyes turned toward one man, the stranger who had fallen from the sky. Captain Eli Graves sat apart from them, his helmet off now, his face marked by dust and blood. He was human, his skin pale, his hair dark, his expression calm but watchful. His armor was damaged and burned in several places, but he worked with quiet focus, repairing his pulse rifle with pieces of scrap he had taken from fallen Dracul weapons. Kalira watched him in silence. There was something strange about this human. Not his strength, not even his bravery, but the way he looked at the battlefield. Not with fear or pride, but with understanding, like someone who had seen 100 wars before this one. Finally, she spoke. "You fight like you were born for it." Eli didn't look up. "No one's born for war," he said simply. "But some of us stop pretending it won't come." Kalira tilted her head. "You speak as if your world has seen much of it." He gave a small, tired smile. You could say that. Humanity's history is a long list of mistakes, but we learned something from each one. He set his rifle aside, looking at her now. That's why we survive. The conversation fell into quiet again. The fire crackled. A soft blue light pulsed from Kalira's spear as she tested its balance. After a while, Eli stood and walked toward the camp's edge, scanning the horizon. Kalira followed. Far below, the plains were littered with glowing wreckage. The Dracul had retreated, but their ship still moved in the distance, small dots of light crawling across the night like insects. Eli's visor hummed as he zoomed in. They're regrouping, he said. Kalira frowned. They won't wait long. Exactly, Eli replied. They'll come again, stronger. Forek's not the type to take humiliation quietly. She folded her arms. And you? What will you do when they return? He looked at her. Fight again. Same as you. Kalira smiled faintly. You are a strange man, Captain Graves, he chuckled. Humans usually are. By morning, the Velari began to rebuild their defenses. The ridge was steep and narrow, good ground for a small army. Under Eli's guidance, they fortified it with whatever they could find. Fallen armor, broken spears, chunks of ship metal. Eli's orders were sharp, clear, and fast. Keep that barricade tight, no gaps. Set these energy cells in the trench. They'll serve as mines. Don't line up straight, they'll target you first. The Velari soldiers watched him with a mix of awe and confusion. He wasn't like their generals. He didn't bark orders from a distance. He worked beside them, digging, lifting, showing by example. When Kalira approached, she found him halfway inside a wrecked Dracul walker, pulling out power conduits. What are you doing? She asked. Turning this thing into something useful. Eli said, grinning. These cores still have juice. We can wire them into your defensive lines. Kalira frowned. You're using their own tech against them? Of course, he said. Humans are good at recycling. She tilted her head. On Virka, that word means to reforge weapons. He laughed softly. Same thing where I'm from. By midday, the camp had changed. Where there was once ruin, now stood walls of metal and trenches filled with energy traps. The Velari warriors trained under Eli's direction, learning new tactics. He taught them how to move in pairs, how to focus fire instead of fighting one-on-one. He showed them how to use the terrain, rocks, smoke, sound, to confuse the enemy. Kalira watched as her soldiers adapted quickly. They were disciplined, graceful, and eager to learn. You train them like soldiers of one mind, she said. Eli nodded. That's how humans fight. We don't have claws or scales or super strength, but when we move together, we can fight anything. She studied him carefully. Together. That is what makes you powerful. He looked at her serious now. It's what makes us human. As the second sun began to fall, a scout rushed into camp. His armor was scorched, his breathing ragged. They're coming, he shouted. 3 Legion, from the east. Kalira's expression hardened. How long? An hour, maybe less. Eli grabbed his rifle and sealed his helmet. Then let's make it count. Soon the ridge was alive with motion. The Velari took positions behind the new defenses. Energy cells hummed underground. Every soldier clutched a weapon, many rebuilt with human designs. The air was heavy with fear and hope. Kalira stood at the front, her silver armor reflecting the dying light. Eli stood beside her, loading his rifle. His HUD displayed hundreds of moving dots, the enemy closing in fast. 3 legions, he said quietly. You ever fought that many? She smiled grimly. Not yet, he looked at her. First time for everything. Then the sky began to glow. The Dracul legions marched in perfect lines. Their armor gleamed black and green, their weapons charged with plasma fire. Forak the Devourer led them, his new armor larger and deadlier than before. His voice echoed across the field. Velari, you defied the Dracul once. You will not do so again. Surrender your world or burn with it. Kalira stepped forward. Her voice rang out strong. This world does not belong to you. Forak laughed. Then die with it. He raised his blade when the horde charged. Eli's visor flared red with target markers. Now, he whispered. The first wave hit the minefield and exploded. Blue fire rolled across the plain, sending shockwaves through the Dracul ranks. Then came the second line. But the Velari were ready. Fire. Kalira shouted. Energy bolts rained down from the ridge. The Dracul advanced, but their lines broke as Eli's traps detonated one after another. The battlefield turned into chaos, dust, fire, and screams. Eli moved like a shadow, firing from one position to another. He switched weapons mid-battle, plasma rifle, rail pistol, even an alien cannon he'd hacked earlier. Each shot was precise, controlled. He never wasted a bullet. Kalira fought beside him, her reforged spear glowing bright silver as she cut through the enemy. Her movements were faster now, smoother, shaped by the training Eli had given. When a Dracul soldier nearly reached the wall, Eli threw himself in front of Kalira, blocking a plasma blade with his armor. The hit burned through his shoulder, but he didn't fall. "You okay?" she asked quickly. He gritted his teeth. "Just a scratch." He punched the Dracul back and fired point blank. The battle lasted hours. Every inch of the ridge was soaked with light and fire. The Velari fought with newfound courage, matching the Dracul blow for blow. When the enemy brought out heavy artillery, Eli had an answer ready. He signaled 2 soldiers. "Hit those generators now!" The Velari triggered the energy conduits they had buried earlier. Massive bolts of blue lightning shot upward, striking the enemy cannons and frying their systems. Kalira couldn't believe it. "You planned this from the start?" Eli smiled behind his visor. "Always plan for overkill." By the time the 3rd Legion reached the ridge, their numbers were half gone. Vorak roared in rage, leading the charge himself. His armor sparked and smoked, but his eyes blazed with hatred. He climbed the ridge, swinging his plasma blade wide. "You think you can stop the Dracul with tricks and scraps, human? You are nothing!" Eli faced him, reloading calmly. "Funny, you said that last time." They clashed, man against monster. Vorak's strikes were powerful, shaking the ground. Eli dodged, countered, fired. Each movement was desperate, every second earned with pain. Kalira tried to reach him, but more enemies blocked her path. Finally, Vorak knocked Eli's rifle aside and raised his blade to strike. Then Kalira's spear cut through the air. It struck Vorak's arm, severing a joint in his armor. The warlord howled. Eli moved in, grabbing a fallen blade and driving it through the alien's chest. Energy flared and then silence. Vorak fell. The battlefield went quiet. The remaining Dracul soldiers froze, then began to retreat. Their warlord was dead. Their courage died with him. Kalira stood over the fallen body, breathing hard. Her eyes met Eli's. Both were covered in ash and blood, but both were still standing. "You fight like you've done this 1,000 times, she said. Eli looked at the retreating horde. "Feels like it sometimes." He turned to her. "Your people fought well. You gave them something to fight for." Kalira smiled faintly. "No, you did." As the sun set again, the ridge was theirs. The Velari cheered, voices echoing through the mountains. But Eli didn't cheer. He stood at the edge of the cliff, looking toward the horizon where more dark shapes moved far away. Kalira joined him. "They'll return, won't they?" He nodded. "Yeah, and not just here. They'll tell the others now that humans are here too." She frowned. "Is that bad?" He smiled, though his eyes looked tired. "For them? Very." The wind blew cold, carrying the smell of metal and victory, and in that moment, under the burning twin suns, Kalira realized something. This one human, this lone warrior from a faraway blue world, had changed everything. Because now, the galaxy knew humanity existed. The days after the second battle passed slowly. The air on Virka Ridge was quiet now, and too quiet. The fires had burned out, and the field below was nothing but ash and twisted metal. The Velari worked tirelessly, collecting their fallen and repairing what they could. But even as they celebrated their victory, everyone knew it wasn't over. The Dracul would come again. Captain Eli Graves stood at the edge of the ridge, staring at the horizon. His armor was patched with alien metal, his rifle slung across his back. The wind tugged at the tattered flag on his shoulder, the symbol of Earth, blue and white, faded by battle. He hadn't slept much. Every night he worked on his wrist communicator, a small device cracked and half-burned from his crash. It was his only link to home, his only hope to call for help. But so far nothing, no signal, no answer. No fleet, just static. Princess Kalira approached quietly. Her footsteps were soft, her silver armor reflecting the pale morning light. She carried 2 cups of steaming drink made from local roots. "You're still trying?" she asked, handing him one. Eli nodded. "It's the only thing I can do that doesn't involve shooting something." She smiled a little. And if no one answers? He took a slow sip, then shrugged. Then I guess I'll keep trying. Kalira studied him. Your people, are they like you? Brave and stubborn? Eli chuckled softly. Brave maybe, stubborn? Definitely. He looked at the sky. If there's one thing humans don't do, it's give up. Later that day, Kalira called a meeting inside the half-destroyed temple they were using as a command hall. The stone walls were cracked, but the great fire still burned in the center. Around it sat the surviving captains of the Velari, warriors with bandaged wounds and tired eyes. Eli sat beside Kalira, listening quietly as she spoke. The Dracul will not stop, she said. They lost twice, but that only fuels their hunger for revenge. Our scouts report that Vorak's brother, High Warlord Kreth, is gathering fleets from the outer systems. The room grew tense. One captain slammed his fist against the table. We can't fight an entire fleet. We have barely enough weapons for one more battle, another said. Then we must retreat deeper into the mountains. Kalira shook her head. Retreat is not survival. It only delays the inevitable. Eli finally spoke. She's right. You can't run from the Dracul. They'll burn everything to smoke just to say they won. He stood, tapping the table with his glove. You need to think bigger. The captains looked at him. Bigger? One repeated. Eli nodded. You don't just need to survive. You need to make them afraid to come back. The room went silent. Kalira leaned forward. And how do we do that, Captain Graves? Eli smiled faintly. We show them that humans don't fight fair. Over the next few days, Eli turned the ridge into a fortress and a laboratory. He began teaching the Velari how to combine their crystal technology with human weapon systems. He had them disassemble the Dracul energy cells, explaining how to overload them to create explosive traps. He repurposed the wreckage of his crashed drop pod into communication towers, using Velari power crystals as amplifiers. Kalira watched him work, amazed. You turned destruction into creation, she said one evening. He shrugged. That's what humans do. We break things, then build something better from the pieces. She looked at the glowing tower they had built together. Will it reach your people? Eli smiled tiredly. If the stars are kind, maybe. That night a storm rolled over the ridge. Lightning flashed across the twin moons. The wind screamed through the ruins like a living thing. Eli worked through the night, connecting wires and circuits, sparks dancing off his gloves. Kalira stayed by his side, holding tools, steadying power cells, watching his every move. Finally, with a deep breath, Eli pressed the activation key. The tower came alive. Blue light surged up its spire, reaching into the clouds. The ground hummed as the energy built. Eli's wrist communicator beeped, the first sound of hope in days. Signal detected, the device said in a mechanical voice. Kalira gasped. It worked? Eli grinned. It's broadcasting. Now let's hope someone's listening. For hours he sat beside the tower, listening to the static on his comms. At first, nothing. Then, a faint voice broke through the noise. This is Fleet Command. Identify your call sign. Eli froze. His heart raced. He grabbed the communicator and shouted, This is Captain Eli Graves, Earth Defense Force. I'm alive on Virka. Repeat, I'm alive. The Dracul are here and we need immediate support. Static again. Then a faint reply. Copy that, Captain. Signal weak but received. Hold position. Fleet en route. Eli let out a shaky breath and smiled. They heard me. Kalira stared at him, eyes wide. Your people are coming? He nodded slowly. Yeah, and they won't come quietly. The next morning, the camp was alive with energy. For the first time, hope was stronger than fear. The Velari worked harder than ever, strengthening walls, sharpening weapons, and preparing for whatever came next. Kalira stood before her people, her voice strong again. Help is coming, not from the stars we know, but from the stars that sent him. The soldiers cheered. Eli watched from a distance, smiling. But deep inside, he knew the Dracul fleet would arrive before the humans did. That night, the warning came. A Velari scout sprinted into camp, shouting, Ships! In orbit. Eli looked up. The sky shimmered with red light. Dozens of massive Dracul warships descending through the clouds. Their engines roared like thunder. Kalira stood beside him, her face pale but fearless. So soon. Eli loaded his rifle. They don't waste time, she turned to him. Can your people arrive before they reach us? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, we'll have to hold them, again. Kalira nodded firmly. Then we will. The Dracul bombardment began at dawn. Plasma fire rained from the skies, shaking the ground. The Valari fortifications held for a while, but cracks began to form. Eli ran through the lines, shouting orders. Stay in cover! Redirect power to the shields. Explosions lit the sky. Towers crumbled. Soldiers screamed. But the Valari held their ground. In the chaos, Kalira fought at the front, her spear glowing bright blue. She moved like lightning, striking and dodging, leading her people with unbreakable will. Eli joined her, firing burst after burst. His armor was dented, his HUD flickering. Still think you can win this? Kalira shouted over the noise. Eli grinned behind his cracked visor. I don't need to win, I just need to survive long enough. Long enough for what? He looked up at the sky. For them to get here, hours passed. The ridge was half destroyed. The Dracul forces landed on the plains below, wave after wave of black armor. Their new leader, Warlord Kreth, stood at the front holding a massive warhammer. Humans, he roared, his voice shaking the mountains. You should have stayed dead. Eli raised his rifle. Yeah, we get that a lot. The final battle began. Kalira fought beside him, her movements fluid, her voice commanding. The Valari followed her like a tide, refusing to fall back even as their numbers dwindled. Eli coordinated the defense, triggering traps, detonating energy cells, using every dirty trick he could think of. His armor alarm blared. Low power, damaged systems, but he ignored it. When the Dracul broke through the main line, Eli led a counterattack himself, charging straight into their ranks. He fought like a man possessed, every strike fierce, every motion calculated. Kalira joined him, her spear and his rifle moving in perfect rhythm. Together they cut a path through the enemy ranks, glowing blue and silver in the smoke, but even as they fought, the sky above them turned red. The Dracul fleet prepared another orbital strike. Kalira gasped. They'll destroy the ridge. Eli pressed his communicator, shouting, This is Captain Graves. We're under orbital bombardment. Fleet, if you can hear me. Before he could finish, the clouds above ripped open, but this time it wasn't the Dracul. A massive shape broke through the atmosphere, a silver warship, larger than any Kalira had ever seen. Its hull shimmered with the mark of Earth. The sky erupted with blue light as the Terran fleet arrived. Dozens of ships followed, firing beams of plasma into the Dracul armada. The ground shook as explosions lit the heavens. The enemy fleet shattered under the surprise attack. Kalira stared, speechless. They came. Eli smiled faintly. Told you. The Dracul on the ground froze as their ships burned above. The Valari rallied, charging forward with renewed fury. The humans' bombardment targeted enemy strongholds with surgical precision. Within minutes, the Dracul army began to retreat, their war machines torn apart by orbital fire. Eli lowered his rifle, breathing hard. That's the sound of backup. Kalira laughed through the smoke. And the sound of victory. As the last of the Dracul fled, the human ships descended lower, sending landing pods and medical drones across the battlefield. Eli removed his helmet and looked up at the sky, eyes bright. For the first time since his crash, he saw his people again. Kalira turned to him. You called them. You brought them here, he smiled softly. No. You gave me a reason to. They stood together as the wind carried the sound of cheering Valari soldiers and roaring Terran engines. The war was not over. But for the first time, the galaxy had seen something new. Humans had arrived among the stars. The battlefield on Virka Ridge was quiet now, but it was a tense quiet. The fires of the previous attacks had mostly died out, leaving only smoke rising in pale blue wisps. The Dracul fleet had been shattered by the Terran fleet, but survivors of their ground forces still lurked in the plains below. The Valari worked quickly, salvaging supplies, repairing broken walls, and tending to the wounded. Their eyes were wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had seen humans in action, not just one, but now dozens, moving with precision, courage, and a strange kind of wild energy. Kalira stood at the ridge's edge, her spear gleaming in the rising sun. Her soldiers moved behind her, their discipline returning with confidence. She had seen death and despair here, but now she saw hope. The humans had brought something her people had never known, reinforcements from the stars. Captain Eli Graves stood beside her, his pulse rifle slung casually over one shoulder. He scanned the horizon as Terran drop pods landed across the plains, unloading soldiers, medics, and engineers. The air buzzed with the hum of human technology, devices unfamiliar to the Velari, yet eerily effective. "Look at them go," Kalira said softly. "Your people, they move like a storm." Eli shrugged, checking his rifle. "Storms can be controlled," he said. "If you know how." She turned to him. "Then teach us." "Teach my people." He smiled faintly. "Already started?" For the next few hours, Eli and his human squad trained the Velari in combined tactics. Humans and Velari moved together in squads, learning to use terrain, traps, and advanced energy weapons in unison. Kalira observed, amazed at the ease with which her soldiers adapted. One Velari captain whispered to her, "I have never seen our warriors learn so fast." Kalira nodded. Humans change everything they touch. Meanwhile, orbital satellites and Terran communication arrays began scanning for Drackhole signals. Engineers worked around the clock, linking Velari crystal technology with human electronics. Eli oversaw the integration personally, sometimes pausing to teach Kalira new tactics. "When they come back," he said, "they won't just be a horde. They'll be smart, coordinated. That's when you need brains, not just courage." Kalira frowned. "We already have courage," he smiled. "Brains plus courage. That's unstoppable." Days passed and the ridge transformed into a true fortress. Trenches hummed with energy. Walls bristled with alien and human weapons. Scouts patrolled the plains, reporting movements. Then, one morning, a Velari scout returned, panting and wide-eyed. "They're gathering again," he said. "All forces from this sector and more. Kreth has called for reinforcements from the outer colonies." Kalira's face hardened. "They will not take this world, not now. Not ever." Eli placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's the attitude we need." "Fear nothing," she nodded. "Together, then?" "Together," he confirmed. As the day drew on, a council meeting was held inside the largest surviving hall. Kalira, Eli, and the top Velari captains sat together. Eli displayed a holographic map, showing Drackhole troop movements and predicted orbital strikes. "They'll come in waves," Eli explained. "First wave, shock troops. Second, mechanized units. Third, orbital bombardment. If we don't coordinate perfectly, we'll lose everything." One Velari captain scoffed. "Even with humans, they outnumber us 10-1. Eli's eyes met his. "Numbers don't win wars. Strategy, unity, and will do. That's what humans rely on. And it works." Kalira's voice was firm. "Then we fight not as Velari or humans, but as one army. Every soldier, every fighter, one mind." The captains exchanged nervous glances but nodded. They trusted her, and they trusted Eli. Over the next days, patrols spotted Drackhole movements. The alien warlords had indeed learned from their previous defeats. They avoided open plains, moved silently, and tested Velari and human defenses. Eli adapted quickly, placing traps, sensors, and decoys. The humans taught the Velari how to create false positions and ambush points, using a combination of holographic projectors and energy mines. Kalira observed him working tirelessly. "You never rest," she said one evening as the sun set behind the mountains. "Rest comes after victory," he replied. "And maybe not even then," she frowned. "Do your people always fight like this?" He laughed softly. "Some do. Most learn fast when survival is on the line." Night fell and the ridge was eerily quiet. The combined forces of Velari and humans waited, hidden behind walls, trenches, and camouflage turrets. Fires burned faintly in the distance, casting long shadows across the ridge. Eli moved through the lines, checking positions, encouraging soldiers, and giving final instructions. Kalira followed, her spear ready. "Remember," he said, "they won't be like before. Kreth has learned. He'll use everything he has. Don't hold back. Fight smart, fight fast, and trust your allies." Kalira nodded. "And if they reach us?" He smiled grimly. "Then they'll wish they hadn't." Hours later, the horizon lit up. The Drackhole fleet arrived in force. Massive ships descended from the sky, and ground troops moved like shadows across the plains. Their weapons glowed green and red, aiming directly for Virka Ridge. Kalira tightened her grip on her spear. "We hold," she whispered. "We do not falter." Eli checked his rifle. "Remember what we practiced. Follow my lead, and stay alive." The first shots rang out. Plasma beams streaked across the sky. Energy shields flashed as the Velari fired back. combining their crystal-based weapons with human pulse rifles. The ground shook under explosions. Terran drones flew low, targeting enemy artillery with precise strikes. Kalira fought at the front, her spear moving like a living thing, cutting down Dracul soldiers who tried to breach the walls. Eli moved beside her, firing with deadly accuracy, taking down larger mechanized units before they could reach the ridge. The Velari, inspired by both their princess and the human soldiers, moved with unity and precision. They became more than an army. They became a single force, an unstoppable wave. Hours passed in chaos. The Dracul adapted, bringing in heavy war machines and orbital bombardments, yet the combined Velari human defenses held firm. At one point, a massive Dracul siegewalker broke through the outer wall, its plasma cannon swinging wildly. Kalira lunged forward to strike, but it was Eli who leapt onto the walker's side, planting an explosive charge. "Get clear," he shouted. The explosion rocked the ridge, sending debris flying. The enemy machine collapsed, crushing a dozen soldiers. Kalira ran forward, helping survivors to safety. Eli stood amidst the smoke, unharmed, brushing dust from his armor. "All part of the plan," he said casually. Kalira couldn't help but laugh. "You are insane." "And proud of it," he replied, smirking. As the battle raged through the night, the alliance of Velari and humans grew stronger. Every wave of Dracul attacks was met with clever traps, coordinated strikes, and fearless soldiers. Kalira saw her people transform. The same warriors who had been cornered and nearly defeated in the first battle now fought like legends. Humans and Velari moved as one, their combined tactics confusing and overwhelming the Dracul. Eli fought tirelessly, his presence a beacon for both Velari and humans. He taught them the value of adaptation, teamwork, and unrelenting courage. Finally, as dawn broke over the ridge, the Dracul retreated. Their forces were shattered, their warlords wounded. Kreth, realizing the combined strength of Velari and humans, pulled back to regroup. Kalira stood atop the ridge, surveying the battlefield. The dead and wounded littered the plains, but the survivors cheered. They had won this fight. Eli joined her, tired but smiling. "We held them," he said. Kalira nodded. "And we will hold again, together." He looked at the horizon. "The galaxy hasn't seen humans like this before." "They'll remember it," she smiled. "They will. And so will we." The alliance was stronger than ever. The Velari had gained more than allies. They had gained a new way of fighting, a new hope. Eli's eyes softened as he looked at Kalira. The ridge was quiet now, but the war was far from over. Yet for the first time since he had fallen from the sky, he felt at home. Because humans had a way of turning hopeless situations into legends. The morning sun rose over Virka Ridge, burning through a thin haze of smoke and dust. The ridge, now a fortress of Velari and human ingenuity, stood as the last barrier between the Dracul and the heart of the planet. Captain Eli Graves walked along the ramparts, checking pulse rifles and energy barriers. The Terran fleet had arrived in orbit, ships hovering like silver guardians. Their guns glimmered in the dawn light, ready to strike at any enemy ship that dared to move. Princess Kalira stood beside him, spear in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. Her people were armed and ready, their spirits bolstered by the victories of the previous battles. The Velari were no longer a beaten army. They were an army transformed. But Eli knew better than to underestimate the Dracul. "They'll come in full force today," he said. Voice low but firm, Kalira nodded. "Then we meet them as one. Velari and humans, together." Eli's visor reflected the rising sun. "Let's make them regret ever stepping foot on this world." The first signs came as shadows moving across the plains. Hundreds of Dracul drop pods pierced the sky, landing with thunderous impacts. The shockwave shook the ridge, sending dust and debris into the air. Kalira raised her spear. "Hold your ground. Do not falter." Eli ran along the lines, shouting orders. "Focus fire. Target the command units first. Keep the walls intact." The Dracul emerged from the pods, enormous, heavily armored, carrying plasma weapons and massive warhammers. Kreth himself was visible atop one of the lead pods, his dark armor glinting, a massive energy hammer in hand. "Humans and Velari," Kreth roared. "Today your defiance ends." Eli adjusted his rifle, eyes scanning. "Not today, buddy. Not today." The first wave of Dracul charged. Energy bolts screamed through the air, striking walls and barricades. Velari shields flared, absorbing much of the attack. Human pulse rifles fired in rhythm, precise and deadly. Kalira moved through the lines, her spear a blur of silver and blue. She struck down any enemy who breached the walls, her movements fluid, fearless. The Velari fought beside her with newfound confidence. Each strike precise, each attack coordinated with the humans. Eli leapt onto the wall, firing at a mechanized unit below. The blast shattered its armor, sending sparks flying. Velari left flank. "Push forward now!" he shouted. The soldiers obeyed, moving like a single organism. The Dracul were strong, but the combined force was faster, smarter, and relentless. Hours passed in brutal combat. Explosions shook the ridge as Dracul war machines smashed against walls only to be destroyed by traps. Human engineering and Velari courage. Kalira noticed Kreth moving closer, swinging his massive hammer at anything in his path. She knew a direct confrontation was inevitable. "Eli," she shouted, "he's heading this way." He looked up, calm despite the chaos. "Then we'll meet him. Together." They ran toward the enemy warlord, moving past fallen soldiers and shattered walls. Every step was a risk, but they moved as one. When Kreth reached the edge of the ridge, his hammer raised high, Eli fired his rifle. Kreth deflected the blast with his armor, roaring in fury. Kalira leapt forward, striking his arm with her spear. Sparks flew as the impact reverberated through the warlord's armor. He swung his hammer in a wide arc. Eli rolled under it, coming up behind the Dracul, planting a pulse grenade. The explosion rocked the ridge, throwing debris and enemies into the air. Kreth roared, staggering but not defeated. "You dare challenge me?" Kalira stepped forward, her spear glowing brighter than ever. "We do not kneel to tyrants." Eli joined her side, his rifle ready, eyes locked on Kreth. "And humans don't run from bullies." The three clashed in a storm of light and sound. Kreth's hammer struck the ground, sending shockwaves. Kalira spun, deflecting strikes with her spear. Eli fired, aimed, and dodged with fluid precision. The battlefield seemed to pause as the three titans fought. Around them, Velarian humans battled side by side, inspired by their leader's courage. Eli whispered to Kalira, "Now." She nodded. Together they feinted left. Kreth, overconfident, swung his hammer wide. Kalira plunged her spear into a weak joint in Kreth's armor, while Eli fired a precise shot into the energy core of his hammer. The weapon exploded, sending Kreth flying backward. He crashed into the ground, screaming. Smoke and sparks rose from his shattered armor. Eli approached, rifle raised. Kreth tried to stand, but Kalira's spear was at his throat. He could fight no longer. "Your reign ends here," Kalira said. Kreth snarled, then slumped, defeated. The rest of the Dracul army froze. Without their warlord, their morale shattered. Terran ships fired precise orbital strikes, destroying remaining enemy units. The survivors fled, leaving the plains littered with wreckage and bodies. Kalira lowered her spear, her chest heaving. Eli rested his rifle on his shoulder, looking at the horizon. "It's over," she said softly. Eli shook his head. "Not really. They'll return. But today, we won," she turned to him. "We fought together. Humans and Velari, you changed everything," he smiled faintly. "We just showed them what happens when humans step in." As the smoke cleared, the Terran fleet landed shuttles and personnel across the ridge. Medics tended to the wounded, engineers began repairing defenses, and soldiers cleaned their weapons. Kalira walked among her people, her eyes filled with pride. She found Eli standing alone, looking up at the sky. "You've done more than survive," she said. "You've saved my world," he shook his head. "We've done it together, and the Velari fought like legends," she smiled. "Humans do not always arrive on time," she said lightly. "But when they do, they make history." Eli chuckled. "I guess that's one way to put it." Days passed, and the alliance of humans and Velari strengthened. The Terran fleet remained in orbit, defending Virka, while Eli continued helping Kalira and her people rebuild. Yet, even as they celebrated, he knew his time here was limited. He could not stay forever. Earth had sent ships, yes, but he had his duty there. One evening, Kalira found him staring at the stars. "You're thinking of leaving," she said softly. He nodded. "Earth will need me, and there are more battles to fight across the galaxy, but I won't forget this place, or your people." Kalira looked at him, her expression conflicted. "You saved my world, Captain Graves. But will you leave us?" Eli smiled faintly. "I fight where I'm needed most. And right now, the galaxy needs humans to show it what courage looks like." She nodded slowly, understanding. Then go, Captain, but no. Firka will always remember you. He extended his hand. And I will always remember you, Princess. She took it. A silent promise passed between them, not just of respect, but of hope. Weeks later, the Terran fleet departed, leaving Valari and humans better prepared for whatever future attacks might come. The ridge had been rebuilt, stronger than ever. Kalira stood atop it, spear in hand, watching the stars where Eli's ships disappeared. Her soldiers gathered around, proud and strong. The Valari were no longer just survivors. They were warriors who had fought with humans, learned from them, and survived against impossible odds. Eli's signal had been heard. Earth would be watching, and the galaxy would remember. Kalira turned to her people. Today we celebrate our victory. Tomorrow we prepare. But always, we remember we fought, we survived, and together we are stronger than any enemy. The Valari cheered, their voices echoing across the mountains. Above, a lone Terran shuttle blinked in orbit, a reminder that humanity had arrived among the stars, and wherever humans went, courage and hope followed. Eli Graves was gone, but his legend remained, a symbol of what one human could do when he chose to stand for others. Kalira raised her spear to the sky. We are not alone, she whispered.